Angela. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on today's trauma informed practice in schools session. It's great to see so many of you here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jennifer, a public health program manager for mental health for the 0 to 19s age group, and I'm here to introduce the session and the three amazing speakers that we will hear from today. So first off, we'll have Alastair Pearson from CAMS, who will introduce the topic of trauma-informed practice in schools and share the existing guidance we have around this. Next, we will be hearing from Bernie Callanan, who is Head of Learning Support at George Green School and who have been trailblazers in this space. Bernie will share their experience implementing trauma-informed practice in their school. And finally, we will be hearing from Eleanor Odonohoe from the Healthy Lives team, who will share their experience using trauma-informed approaches in various health promotion work streams in schools. We will then have time for questions and discussion after the three presentations, but please feel free to use the chat function in the meantime. And as Angela mentioned, the session will be recorded and we will circulate the presentation slides around afterwards to share with your colleagues. And I'll share my screen and hand over to Alastair for our first presentation.
Thank you, Jen.
No problem.
And I'm going to talk through a few slides just by way of setting some context. We're conscious that there will be school colleagues as well as people working in other sort of services as well. So we're speaking to a very wide audience with different kind of experiences and knowledge about school practice. Charlotte may chip in now and then. Charlotte Hertz, you give a wave. I can't stress how much Charlotte deserves credit for hanging in and promoting and sharing and bringing people together over the last couple of years, thinking about trauma-informed practice. So she'll chip in now and then if she sees an opening. Otherwise, I'm going to rattle through a very brief introduction to get us going. I want to make that the main takeaway point here is that trauma is not an optional issue. Whether you think you're doing trauma-informed practice or not, you are working with trauma. It's like the wind. It does not respect borders. It will make itself present in all our institutions and our services in a number of different ways. And I think it's absolutely brilliant that there is now this focus on how do we meaningfully support, help, promote healing for, in our area, I guess, children, especially young people who have experienced very difficult things early in their life. So it's a critical issue. Want to make the point that there are already practice frameworks at play in the education sector for which trauma-informed practice is very, very relevant. Again, whether or not named as such. I want to start by recognizing the framework that everyone here I'm sure will have heard of, the Ofsted framework, but we hear about it, but how many people know what it actually consists of if you're not working in a school? So just to make that visible. The Ofsted framework is extremely important for schools to show adherence to, and whatever your views on it, and it's obviously been in the media a lot recently, but it's still a crucial framework that needs to be recognised. And these are the four areas that Ofsted look for in their inspections: are quality of education, but also behaviour and attitudes, personal development, leadership and management. And if we think about when we look at what trauma-informed practice is, it is relevant to all those four domains, I would argue. So if a school is looking to show that it is working meaningfully within the Ofsted framework, then it will be assisted in that by looking at and exploring how to apply trauma-informed ideas to those different domains of the framework. The second framework I want to highlight are NICE guidelines. NICE traditionally, in many people's minds, is associated with physical health problems more, but its remit has expanded. It's actually now stands for the National Institute for Clinical and Health and Care Excellence. and they have developed very recent NICE guidelines, and NICE guidelines are a bit like the Ofsted framework for health professionals. They should not be ignored. They are put together after a huge amount of research and consultation, and but they are much less known within the education world than are the Ofsted framework. I can't commend enough the value of looking at the NICE guidelines here. There's a live link here. Jen has kindly sorted out. So if you want to kind of look at the range of evidence and practices recommended by NICE, which does, I mention this because it does include the value of trauma-informed approaches in schools, but you'll be able to see the kind of evidence and support for taking that stance. And finally, the third framework, which schools work within, this is long-standing guidance from the DfE, the whole school approach to mental health and well-being. Again, this is an important framework for all partners, everyone working with schools, to be aware of, because this is a DfE guidance for how schools can best support the well-being of their students. And it covers, you can see there, I won't read them out, but you can see a range of different domains in which schools think about the well-being of both their staff, their students, and their parents and carers and the wider community. And again, I would say that trauma-informed ideas are either implicit in most of these areas, and when made explicit, can support a school to demonstrate that it is working within a whole school approach to mental health and well-being. So those are key frameworks to be aware of, which set the context for thinking about trauma-informed practice. Okay, next slide, please. Very briefly, this will come as no surprise, but there's a slide just showing the huge range of forms of trauma that people can experience. And again, you can see they cover school-based issues as well as a whole range of other things that can happen in a social context. Next slide, please. You may have heard of the ACEs. The thinking around ACEs is ever changing and evolving and expanding, but they are, again, it's worth being aware of the sorts of things that are covered by the ACEs. Again, you can see the kinds of things that can impact upon the development of a child. I think maybe the next slide might say, but the more of these a child experiences, the greatest impact on their long-term health and well-being there at that point there. So again, you can see the impact on physical health, social and economic health and well-being, as well as very school-based issues around academic performance, exclusion, behaviour issues in school. Next slide, please. Again, this is just you imagine if you're not a teacher or work in schools, just imagine you are at the front of a class of 30 students, and this is the social reality of that group of children and young people that you are standing in front of, looking to educate and support their well-being. When you add it up, you think about the complexity of what the issues that the children are facing and what they're bringing into the classroom and into schools. Then this illustration is a graphic demonstration of just how many children are struggling with very challenging issues. Next slide, please. Again, just thinking about what we mean by trauma and how it shows itself. And I guess one of the importance of trauma-informed ideas and thinking that it's inviting us to shift away from a narrow interpretation of behaviour as being sort of negatively connoted. It is difficult, but more or less we are wanting to think about trauma and challenging behaviour as a communication of some form of underlying distress, and it needs to be understood through that frame rather than a kind of a criticism of a young person's sort of character or behaviour. Next slide, please. This is a really helpful graphic that just illustrates that point I was just making in terms of what the how behaviour might present itself and be described in kind of intuitive, common ways. So again, which is done in critical or negative ways. And this slide, Beacon House is one of the sort of organisations which has developed a huge range of resources and to help us think about trauma-informed practice. So this is one of their slides. Again, just inviting us to think about what is hidden, helping us to reframe behaviour which may be seen as problematic in some way, and to think of maybe what's happening underneath the surface for that particular child. Next slide. Karen Treisman is somebody who has done training in the local authority in Tower Hamlets, lots of social care staff, and has developed a lot of the thinking for trauma-informed practice. So this is just again highlighting the critical importance of the quality of relationships and how important they are to helping children heal from trauma. And I think it's important to say that because maybe in schools or other professionals who have dealings with children who've experienced trauma may underestimate just how significant the quality of relationship that they offer to children is. So that's a key point here, and that point is reinforced by the next slide. Again, this comes from Karen Treisman around the importance of relationships in helping children in a number of ways, and this critical idea that every interaction is an intervention. So there's nothing neutral. Every word, even a tone, a facial expression, these things can have a real impact, both negatively but also importantly positively for a child. This slide here comes from one of the DFE during COVID put out a lot of resources for schools to kind of highlight how to support children's mental health during COVID, and that presentation was called Every Interaction Matters. So again, what we're looking at here is not coming from just the mental health world. It's coming from the DFE, who have greatly expanded their resources internally to think about mental health and well-being. So I think, could that be my last slide, or have we got one more?
Yes, that's the last.
Oh, there's the last one. There you go. A very brief whistle-stop tour of some of the ideas that we can use and to set the scene for our colleagues who are going to take over. Charlotte's saying very quiet. She isn't. I'm thinking we must have covered everything, Charlotte. Unless you have any additional thoughts or.
No, I think that was great. Thank you, Alastair. I'm sure there's more to say in this discussion, but let Bernie carry on.
Brilliant. Okay, I shall happily mute myself.
Great. Thanks, Alastair. That was excellent. Bernie, so I'm happy to hand over to you.
Lovely.
For the next segment.
Would you like me to share my slides?
Yes, that'd be great if you have them.
Yep, perfect. Yep, certainly.
Thanks, Bernie. So just to remind you that Bernie is Head of Learning Support at George Green School.
All right, thank you, everybody. So I'm not going to talk a great deal about learning support in a sense, because to be meaningfully trauma informed, it's much more about the whole school and the leadership. and the culture and ethos of the school. So this is something that we have, and we stole it from Liverpool Football Club, where you've got the sign on the way to the pitch, and all players tap the sign of "This is Anfield," and there's lots that we talk about in George Green School as to what it means to be a colleague here and a student here. So we often are talking about culture and ethos. Now, these slides, I've not done anything with them. These are the inset slides from John Ryder, our principal, from September this year. And the point I want you to be gaining is that this very much needs to come from leadership for it to be something that meaningfully happens in school. So there are two flames, excuse me, just here we are. So there are two flames burning in the human heart all the time: the flame of anger against injustice and the flame of hope that you can build a better world. So this was the second or third slide of inset, and our head teacher talks often about the injustice and the unfairness of society, and that lots of our cohort are having to deal with day in, day out. And the hope that with meaningful inclusion, we can make a fundamental difference. Talks about our vision being exceptional, our young people being happy, feeling safe, helping them to become change makers and be the best people they can be. But if we're thinking about trauma informed, particularly happy, safe and economically secure. And then he's started to talk about the data in our school. So PPG being pupil premium, FSM being free school meals. A third of the school has got special educational needs, and of those 30% with special educational needs, half of them have social, emotional, mental health difficulties, so very often specifically linked to trauma. So he's giving that overview of this very complicated context within which we work. And then when we talk about pupil premium and free school meals, the reality is for people to qualify for that, families are earning, families, not individuals, families, the household income is £7,400 annually, and that is 617 a month. And these, I'm sure you'll all agree, are shocking statistics, but this is on an inset day, the first day, illustrating just what it's like for lots of our families and the pressures they're under and what they're having to deal with day in, day out as parents of young people in our community. And 52% more crimes were recorded in most econ-deprived areas, etc. So again, that specific link between antisocial behaviour, crime, difficulties specifically linked to poverty. Okay, so really painting the picture for our staff as to what things are like for the families and the young people day to day. But, and I think this is really important, this doesn't for a second mean that our expectations of these young people aren't at the very highest. And then the two deputies came in with the slides that I'm going to zip through these really quickly, which are to do with bridging the consistency gap. Now, one of the two main strands I would say that are our approach to trauma-informed practice in George Green School. Now, number one is this, bridging the consistency gap, and number two is relationships, which I know Alastair's already alluded to. But the consistency is so key. If you've got a large cohort or a large proportion of your cohort that are experiencing huge amounts of inconsistency, uncertainty in their life, whether that be there's going to be food at home, whether that's going to be their family are going to be fighting, or whether someone's going to be at home that evening, etc., etc., they need to be having a school life which is full of consistency, full of predictability. And so this is what this vision behind bridging this consistency gap is all about. So like I said, so Mr. Ryder did the initial bit, painting the picture of the context, and then the two deputies came through. And we're talking about being very tight about some specific things to do with how we deliver lessons, how we expect, the expectations we have of interactions with students, and all of those kind of things. So Mr. McQuaid, the deputy, started talking about these 4 areas, and he was talking, we have students line up in Key Stage 3 at the beginning of every lesson. They line up on the playground. That's a time for the teacher to begin going down the line, getting those consistent routines in place, making sure people are calm and settled. The learning mentors at this time are doing their check-ins with their cohort as necessary. For Key Stage 4 and 5, we want teachers on the door, welcoming the young people in, building those positive relationships before they've got in the door. So again, very tight on these routines, doing the uniform check at the end of every lesson. So every lesson, consistently, every teacher is doing the uniform check at the end. So the expectations remain high no matter how hard these young people's lives are. We've got the, this is talking about more of the routines, how to do a good lineup as a teacher, how to build the relationships during lineup before the lessons even started, how to get those tones right when you can see someone's a bit bubbly or they're looking really scruffy. So just high expectations of the staff. Staff have got complete clarity about what they need to be doing. Likewise, for those that are teaching Key Stage 4, so all teachers to be on their door, doing their check-ins, clarity around what we need to be doing with communicating people in detention, etc. Then again, beginning of every lesson. So what the beginning of every lesson needs to look like. And again, the consistency. This is, whilst it's strict, whilst it's high expectations, this is care, because it's very predictable for the young people that need that. So students entering the classroom quietly, equipment out, expected to engage in the do now, keeping the do now to 15 minutes. The end of the lesson, talk right to the end, leaving the lesson in perfect uniform, taking responsibility for their space, tucking things back in. All of these things, really sweating the small stuff to keep standards really high. Now, this is to do with oracy and to do with their engagement and listening within lessons, so no heads on desks. We do a questioning technique where we'll say the question and then we say the person's name. Now, if the person's got speech and language difficulties, we'll use their name first, but other than that, we won't do that. So we want to try and keep people actively involved. Got a rule about no heads on desks. And then this is something we're bringing in this year, so really high expectations of people's presentation of their work. No graffiti, specifically date top right hand side, title top in the middle, and things stuck in really neatly. So all of these examples of what things need to be looking like, and this has been shared. This is shared with teachers, and then this just this week, all of this has been shared with the students as well via Key Stage 3 assemblies. Clarity around the steps, and again giving all that consistency for the teachers, so lesson to lesson the young people are going through this same things. How to write a Sims notice. Okay, so this isn't about the emotions of the teacher, so we're removing emotive language, reporting facts only, the steps that you've taken. All right, so this would not be a good example. This is not a real student, so don't worry about the GDPR there. But this would be a more impartial, trauma-informed example with the clarity of the steps that were taken to support and to follow the consistency of the school systems. Now, so then we went to the next deputy head, who's talking specifically about curriculum, and you'll what the beginning of the lessons need to be looking like. And then this bit, again, you might think it's a tenuous link, but it's hugely important. I've said to you, we have 30% of young people who've got special educational needs. Lots of them have got speech and language difficulties, lots of them are autistic, lots of them have got ADHD, and therefore they need to dual code. They need to be able to see the visuals as well as a text. The visuals on this slide are available for every teacher, and every teacher is expected to use these visuals throughout all of their lessons. So the moment you see one of these visuals, you know what it means and what you're supposed to be doing. And the idea is from lesson to lesson, you've got that ability to quickly activate and recall and understand what you're doing, because everybody's using the same visuals, because you've got that consistency, which again is our one of our visions for being trauma informed. The seating plan is a huge thing about making sure we are mixing gender and ethnicity. We're highlighting those who've got special educational needs. So this is making sure our teachers are really engaging with the reading comprehension of all of their students, special educational needs of all of their students, and making sure that that's then shared with the, if an observer's coming in. But again, it's about the teacher getting to know their class, getting to know those relationships. Okay, this person's got a reading comprehension score of 72. Goodness gracious, that's very low. I need to have them sat at the front with me so I can do regular check-ins with them to make sure that they're managing to track and understand the text that they're reading, for example. And then we've got a real big push, and there's a website called www.provisionmap.co.uk. Every young person on the school is on this website, and that you'll see here there's this 398. That is 398 learning plans. There are 398 learning plans which often link to a person's educational healthcare plan. So there's lots of information about that. We've got about 100 educational healthcare plans in the school. But then the extra 300 on top of that, approximately, they are students that would be SENK. They might have a learning mentor. They might have a diagnosis, but it's not an educational healthcare plan is not necessary. But the point is, there's a document for teachers which gives a context of this young person. What are their areas of strength? What are their areas of concern? What are the strategies that work really well? What are their interests and their passions and their loves? All enabling an opportunity for teachers to be able to get to know these young people, to hold them in mind outside of the class. This is the structure of our department, and I'm just particularly want to zone in on this goldy yellow circle. Now, within the extended part of the department, we've got Fuse. I can see we've got Lizzie here today, who's been amazing working in our school over the past few years. So she's a educational wellbeing practitioner. I don't know her title now because she recently got promoted, but she's been doing amazing stuff in the school. So we work very closely with her. We also work very closely with Place to Be and Place to Talk. They over the course of last year, they did upwards of 400 sessions with young people about lots of different matters, which I've been sharing with the young people as part of Mental Health Awareness Week this week. But I just want to zone in on this golden circle. So we have 2 senior learning mentors and 4 learning mentors, and you might notice there's different colours in this structure, and it breaks the into the 4 broad areas of special educational needs. So you've got communication and interaction, you've got sensory and physical, cognition and learning, and you've got social, emotional, mental health. Now, being that this is trauma informed, that's links to the strand, social, emotional, mental health. So we've got 2 senior learning mentors and 4 learning mentors, and they are an integral part of our team. They have lots and lots of young people with social, emotional, mental health difficulties who 5-10 years ago would have been labelled as a bad kid and would have quickly got into situations which escalated, and would have quickly likely been excluded and gone down that path. Now we're getting to know these young people. We're developing what's called a mentor-mentee agreement, which is a 6 to 12 week program where the mentee meets with family and the young person, and they create targets. Again, the expectations are incredibly high, but there are young people that need support in meeting these expectations. So yes, the expectations never go low, but we scaffold the amount of support that a young person requires in order to meet these high expectations. And there's a real important point there. If on this mentor-mentee agreement, if the agreement is not being maintained upon review, and this is really in a way we took this off of CAMS. If you're going to be working with people that are not willing to engage, you're throwing the kitchen sink of support at them, they're not willing to engage. Well, you've attempted this, and then the next step on what the next steps that need to be taken will be taken. I'll explain those to you in a minute. The behaviour steps, so suspensions and inclusions. So like I said to you 5-10 years ago, we had 400, 500, almost 600 days of exclusion in 2018-19, and last year 77 days of exclusion. We have not done a permanent exclusion since Mr. Ryder's been principal. That's something he's fundamentally against and wants to avoid at all costs. So there's lots of engagement with the ladder. So we have a behaviour ladder. Again, this is about transparency and clarity, it being trauma informed, helping the families and helping young people to know what the steps are and what's going to happen at what stage. And if people go to different stages on the ladder, there's intervention of support that's put in place depending on where they are on the ladder. There's the pastoral support plans, which the deputy head and the principal lead on. And there's the fair access protocol, which I know lots of Tower Hamlets schools are involved in, and it really is an amazing thing where people are given a fresh shot and they've avoided a permanent exclusion, and they've more often than not, it really works out well for these young people, which is a brilliant thing that the borough does. There are challenges. It is. I'm not saying we've got the answers by any stretch, and there are lots and lots of things that can be really difficult. So disengagement from families. Some families are incredibly hard to reach. Some families have such lack of trust in something as mainstream and systemic as a mainstream school, and they might walk into the building and you see their shoulders tense because maybe they had an awful time in school, maybe their needs were never met in school, maybe they were labelled as the naughty child in school when in fact they just had experienced a lot of trauma and needed their needs met. So we do still deal with levels of disengagement, and we work really hard to engage, but we don't always win that battle. The time to get support processes followed through is really difficult. For example, if we feel like somebody might be autistic, you're looking at years on a waiting list. ADHD is quicker, but again, it's still an issue. If we are applying for an EHC, that's 6 months, which that's good. That would be good going to get an EHC in 6 months from process from start to finish. So the time is a difficult one. With the systems within which we've created to our pastoral systems, the communication is challenging. Okay, and this year we're looking to make sure there's a greater transparency. Being transparent with you, I'll say that is something that has been tough. Knowing exactly where every really vulnerable young person is within a situation and what support's been put in place and what the next steps are, and everybody being able to quickly access that information is really challenging. And just borough-wide and nationwide, the lack of available suitable provision for people, particularly for young women with social, emotional, mental health needs, or neurodiverse young women. I mean, it's just shocking how little provision there is, and so you are often putting a plaster on things metaphorically, or you are trying to contain something that really is not suitable. So having young people in your setting where it just simply is not appropriate, and you're having to adopt this approach of containment because you know full well that the young person would be at home otherwise, and you might have questions of the safety of them even being at home, and you know that it can take years for any provision to be found, and so that's a real difficult situation that can leave us in a bit of a stalemate and a bit of a quandary. Now, when Alastair was talking about you had that iceberg, we've got similar analogies with Mount Everest and Mauna Kea, which is the dormant volcano, which is even bigger than Mount Everest, and the ACEs. You know, all of those things have been going on for the past 3-4 years. That again, but it's been led by the head teacher. It's been led by the deputy head teacher, and they've been delivering training on what ACEs are and how the brain is affected from traumatic experiences and all of those kind of things. So relationships, fundamental, 100%, but also the consistency bit. And I suppose I've found in some meetings I've had recently where you talk about high expectations and you talk about consistency. I think people are quite quick to suggest that, oh goodness me, well that's not inclusive. What about the person with speech and language difficulties, or what about the person with ADHD? And I would suggest that high expectations and consistency is incredibly inclusive of people with lots of special educational needs, because they inherently prefer predictability because of the profile that they have. So yeah, trauma-informed practice is definitely not to be confused with fluffy, soft, letting people get away with things. It's about building relationships, but also maintaining those high expectations through the fact that you've built a really solid and purposeful relationship. So we challenge, but we challenge it with warmth, and we're firm, but we're firm with care, and that's how we go about it at George Green School. Does anybody have any questions?
Thanks, Bernie. That was really interesting. I see Angela has her hand up.
I don't want to steal the floor from other people, but maybe a quick question, because I think we have to probably go on to the next presentation, and then maybe we'll have time after for other questions. I wondered if you have a mechanism for, like, I guess, either feedback or sharing ideas from students and or teachers on this approach, or on like the trauma-informed approach style that you've taken.
So I think that the learning plans are pretty integral because the students have their voice in them. So there's a whole part of what's important for them. What do teachers need to avoid when working with them? What kind of things do they like? So student centered in that sense. For teachers, if they've got concerns about a student, I don't know if it's exactly what you meant by your question, but if teachers have got a concern about their young person in one of their classes, they would fill in a learning support referral form that then goes through to the inclusion register, which is again has got the whole school on it, and we would then allocate a provision, whether that be views, or whether that be place to be or a learning mentor, based on what the concerns are. Or it might be something completely different that's got nothing to do with trauma or mental health. It might be something to do with cognition and learning or communication and interaction. But that's where you get the teacher involvement there. In terms of feedback from the processes that have been introduced regarding the ladder and all of those kind of things, I think 10 years ago, George Green's was a place where quite literally chairs were being launched across rooms. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there were riot vans in the playgrounds, and there was a real issue with racism. And now you're talking about some background noise and some low-level disruption. So people, teachers are grateful for the clarity of process and being able to fall on a system which is really strong and solid, and because it has just helped to make the school a more productive and calm place. In terms of student voice specifically, I mean, generally students report that they feel safe in the school, but whether there's specific approaches that we've got feedback on yet, I don't know on that one. I might need to check that.
Thank you. And we probably have time for one more question, so I'll go to Claire and then we'll go on to the Healthy Lives presentation. Go ahead, Claire.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that, Bernie. It was fantastic. I really, really appreciated that. It was so clear and thorough, and I appreciate it was an internal presentation that you've shared and then explained to us. I think it could be applied in so many different settings. And I wonder if you have any thoughts around how that might be, the learning around it, and I guess the structure, the framework might be disseminated into other settings, because that's obviously been championed by your new head, and then the staff all coming on board and recognising the value in it. So yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any sort of approach to that you could recommend.
Yeah, I think the thing about trauma-informed practice, if you're a leader of an organisation that's working with young people, I think particularly like a mainstream organisation, I think the initial interpretation is, okay, you're going to be soft and some kids are going to be flying off the wall, and you're going to be sat there and you're going to be like, right, so what's the feeling behind this behaviour and how did that come about? And that's really not appealing to lots of people, and that isn't how we interpret trauma-informed practice. It's relationship based, but then you can have the really high expectations. And I think if we kind of change, I think some of the messaging around it, I think you get an awful lot more people on board, because it's definitely not about softness or anything like that. But I think I remember the first few training sessions I'd watched of external things. I think I probably thought, well, yes, this is all well and good in a one-to-one session, but when you've got a group of 30 kids in a class, how are you going to embed this practice? So it's about making something that's going to work within a mainstream environment. So the clarity of the systems and the consistency is really key for that. But you need to have a structure where you can have staff that can build relationships. So our learning mentors, I cannot tell you how wonderful those people are. They do such amazing things day in, day out, and they really help us carry us through some of those difficult times.
Great. Thanks. And thanks again, Bernie, for a very inspiring presentation. So moving on to Eleanor from Healthy Lives, who's going to speak a bit about the health promotion work and the trauma-informed practice being used. So I can share the slides, Eleanor, if that's helpful.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Just pull these up. Yeah, can you see that okay?
Yeah, that's fab.
Brilliant.
Hi everybody. So I'm a Healthy Lives advisor in the Healthy Lives team. We work around the Healthy Schools programme. And we were thinking about how our work relates to trauma-informed practice, and really actually felt that all of it is related to trauma-informed practice. We're, as it says there, reducing or preventing health-related traumatic experiences in childhood and into adulthood. And really we're just about trying to make children's lives healthier and consequently happier. And you need physical health to be able to have good mental health. So it really runs through everything we do. Schools can be very stressful. I think we just heard that they can be quite stressful places. And we work with all schools in the borough, so primary, secondary and special schools, obviously with different ways of working in different contexts. And I think we can all think of stressful experiences that we had, you know, being in school, and they are kind of by their nature quite stressful places. So it's a child's kind of first step into independence, and it can, you know, that can be a bit anxiety inducing and a bit frightening. And we don't know also what those children are bringing, you know, with them as well into that environment. So some of the work that we do in Healthy Schools, physical activity in the playground and looking at the lunchtime can often be some of the most stressful experiences for children. They can be some of the more stressful environments for the child. So yeah, this is the obesity figures. Healthy Schools is divided into some really clear areas, healthy eating being one of them. And of course, the obesity figures sort of underpin a large amount of that work. So we have almost, as you can see here, almost half of Year 6 children are either overweight or obese in Tower Hamlets. This increased quite a lot during the pandemic. Unfortunately, it has reduced since then, although not back to pre-pandemic, I don't think. This is a fairly terrifying figure, whichever way you look at it, for mental and physical health. We know that if you are overweight or obese in Year 6, then your chances of ever being a healthy weight throughout your life are very, very low. So we want to kind of try and do as much preventative work as possible throughout the child's life. The dental decay, there is actually a typo on this. It's actually 30% of 5-year-olds have visually obvious dental decay, because I was looking at the figures for something else. But that's a really terrifying figure as well. I remember talking to schools who I think had like children who were being taken out at the age of 5 to have 11 teeth removed. I mean, that's a terrifying idea as an adult, but if you're 5 years old, that's you know, that's something we want to be trying to avoid at all costs. So there's obviously lots of trauma that would be involved and related to that as well. So huge amounts of embarrassment, a lot of pain, and oral health is the #1 cause of time off school, which is going to disrupt friendship groups and learning, and just is generally a fairly traumatic thing for young children to be going through. So we want to try and do everything we can to improve these figures in the right direction. So you can go to the next one, Jen. So we do a lot of work around the whole school food picture. Obviously, lunchtime is a really integral part of that. A good lunchtime experience supports an easier learning environment. It says post lunchtime, but I would say also prior to lunchtime, because I think if you're anxious about lunchtime, that is going to affect what your experience in the classroom is before going into the lunchtime. For some children, this might be their main meal of the day and potentially the only meal that they are eating at a table. And you know, quite a high likelihood that they're going to be their only experience of healthy eating as well. So an improved healthy eating environment helps to tackle obesity, and it's the part of the child's day that we can impact. It's the bit that we can control as much as possible and give them the gold standard of food and experience in a kind of a healthy eating, well, a food environment we otherwise don't know what is happening. Lunchtimes can be quite stressful, and that can really affect the mental health of children and how much anxiety that they are feeling around the experience of the lunchtime. And any teacher will tell you that the time after lunch can be really difficult because there can be lots of issues that can spill over into the classroom after lunchtime, and they can spend quite a lot of time in the classroom trying to sort those issues out. So I think the trauma-informed practice would be reducing this stress around lunchtime as much as possible. And there's lots of different approaches that we use, primarily with primary schools. I think secondary school lunches are a different ball game, but family style dining is a big a way of improving the experience for the children. So there's a really quite an impactful picture here of a school that I went into on the left. Just really demonstrates just the real simplicity of not being able to see the food, but somebody asking you, what would you like? And how do you make that decision if you can't see it? And so it's what can we do, sort of simple changes that we can do to make things like that not happen, so that children are talked through the menu in the morning, maybe that there's work done in the classroom about what the new menu on road. There's a new menu, 2 menus each school year. So what's in the new menu cycle, making sure that that menu is being delivered. So that's the other thing, is that children will be expecting one thing to be offered that day, but actually something else comes in. Reducing the queuing, so we really simple things suggest to schools that the children come in and sit down at the table first, lay the table with their cutlery from cutlery pots on the table, set out their cups, all pour each other water, and then go up table by table to get their food, so that it's just doing as much as possible to reduce the feeling of a canteen. And to give these children an experience of sitting at a table and eating a meal, and making that highlighted as also a sociable experience, and that it's not just about gobbling down a load of food and then getting out to the playground as quickly as possible. And obviously, the more we can reduce the anxiety around the lunchtime, the more chance we've got of children trying different foods, which is the endless. I have a 2.5-year-old. This is an endless struggle for anyone working with children. So trying to just take the anxiety out of it, so that, and also increase the exposure to healthy options. So things like putting the salad on the table. We're working with schools to put the fruit on the table. So even if children aren't kind of gobbling all of that down initially, that there's a real feeling that one day that peer pressure of seeing their friends try it, of wanting to, you know, experience the you know, passing it to each other and handing it down the table and that kind of thing, will you know, one day support those children to try and eat more fruit and vegetables. So that's a really nice way of working with schools to improve those things. Totally different subjects, but all kind of working towards the same goal, which is to reduce anxiety and stress in children's lives, is RSE, so relationships and sex education. A big area of this is trying to ensure that children have the confidence and knowledge and the language to be able to report sexual abuse. So that is, I would imagine one of the most traumatic things that a child could ever go through, and we couldn't possibly say we were going to try and prevent that. It's rather out of our hands, but we certainly can ensure that children have the ability to be able to report it accurately, to understand it is abuse, to have the names of the sexual body parts so they are able to explain what's happened. So that's a big element of relationships and sex education. Also periods, and ensuring that young girls don't think that they're bleeding to death if they get their period before they've been taught about it. We recommend that schools teach puberty in year 4. We know that there are links between weight and the age that young girls will get their periods, and of course in a population with increased obesity levels, we need to ensure that we're telling them about it before it happens to them, because that's going to be a fairly traumatic experience. And then personal hygiene is another really simple but really important one, that's going to be fairly traumatic if you're the only child in the class who isn't washing. So we ensure that that's something that children are taught to just empower themselves. And then the next one. So mental and emotional health and well-being. I would say all of Healthy Schools is about improving mental and emotional health and well-being. That's what all of this kind of relates to. It's all interlinked. We do specific work, and we have done specific projects in schools around playground activities, so having playground leaders, and therefore having a kind of peer mentoring experience, and that's worked really well. They can be quite traumatic places, the playground, and I think children can often feel a bit panicked and bullied without the safety net of the classroom and the teacher. So this can also bring some really sort of needed structure into an otherwise really can feel quite a sort of free for all experience in the playground. We also have done work with a lot of schools to implement PSHE and mindfulness. There's a lot of schools in the borough who use Jigsaw, which is a mindful approach to PSHE, which is something that we worked with a lot of schools to introduce. And they, in each lesson, have a calm me moment where they use a chime, and it really supports children to be able to manage their own kind of internal world and give them some tools that the schools report that the pupils will use these calm me moments independently, maybe if they're doing their SATs or at other kind of stressful times, they will access that kind of, they'll ask, oh teacher, can we do a calm me moment? So that's really wonderful to hear. And then the next one is physical activity. Really strong links between physical activity and mental health, and we do a lot of work to implement the Daily Mile. The Daily Mile was a national intervention that was 15 minutes desk to desk. All the children just go out into the playground and they all run around the playground for however long they're able to do. And it's an incredibly inclusive way of getting everybody to do some physical activity. We really want to promote the message that physical activity is a part of everyday life and it's for everybody. So it's really fantastic if you do and are good at competitive sports, but obviously a lot of pupils aren't. And particularly girls, there's a really big issue with the interest from girls in physical activity dramatically wanes as they get older. So it's something that they really enjoy doing because they can chat to their friends while they're running around the playground. And it's really nice because more often than not, the staff really get involved. So they'll run around with the kids, and actually that's really lovely. So we find that teachers report that pupils will be saying, oh, you know, teacher, you've forgotten to do our daily mile. Can we go out and do our daily mile? So it's a really fantastic and really simple intervention. And then active movement is another one we've started doing, which is reducing sedentary behaviour. So that's basically trying to get children to stand whenever they can. Instead of putting their hand up, they might stand up instead. And that's something that 5 schools we've been working with are working with active movement to implement that. And then that's it. The healthy schools, we have we're the top performing borough in London for Healthy Schools London from the Mayor of London. We have 93%, although this was higher. I think there's a couple of new schools that have appeared in the borough, so they we'll be working with them to gain a bronze award, which covers all the areas and is like a baseline of health work across all the areas of healthy schools. And then we also do silver and gold awards, which is much more targeted to a specific need that's been highlighted. And we have the highest number of awards in London for those as well. So that's it.
Great. Thanks, Eleanor. That was really helpful and very insightful.
Pleasure.
Just stop sharing my screen. Great. So we have just under 10 minutes for questions and discussion. So I invite any questions that you may have. Paul, I see your hand is up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. We've had lots of discussions around lunchtime, and there was a real, you know, during the pandemic, we did more of a family dining service model that was, you know, it's just logistically, there's a lot of resistance within the team here to sort of to do that now that we've got everybody here and what have you. One of the discussions we've been having about is what is the optimum amount of playtime and lunchtime, and that sometimes it feels like they're actually on the playground for too long at lunchtime. Has there been any research, or is there any thinking been done around that? What is an hour with lunch the right amount of time?
What school are you, Paul?
We're on Manorfield.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we are doing active movement in Manorfield at the moment. Yeah. Why are you not standing up is the question. I'm kidding. There are different ways that we, first of all, I would say family style dining is absolutely a great model. And I think if you were managing to do it in the pandemic, I would really advocate going back to it. I think if you can do it in a lockdown, then you can do it out of a lockdown. And it's a really, it has all kinds of really fantastic benefits. I don't know about, I would love lunchtime to be longer, but I think there's probably slight issues with curriculum and timetables. But what we have, what I'm working with some schools is to implement mixing up year groups. So you end up with a peer support of younger and older pupils sitting together in a very sort of deliberate way. You might have year 3 sitting with year 5 pupils and one on, one off at the table. But what we found is that speeds up the younger pupils and slows down the older pupils because they are taking time to model how you might sit and eat a meal and use your knife and fork. And it's a really lovely way of offering a bit more supervision for younger children, but we've really noticed that there's a lot less adult supervision happening in lunchtimes because there's a lot less money and staff. So anything that you can do to create a more peer support experience is a really kind of win-win, really. And yes, because we find that older children are racing through their food to get out into the playground. So some schools do implement a kind of a specific amount of time that you need to be in the lunchtime, so that all children have to spend that time in the lunchtime regardless of whether they're eating or not. That's another approach, but we'd be really happy to talk to you about working on your lunchtime if you wanted to. It's something that we are rolling out to more schools in the borough, and we've sent out a survey to all schools in the borough about their whole school food environment and what areas they might want to work on and what areas they might want support on. So I'd be really happy to get your details and contact you directly about it if you wanted to look at it more.
I'll email you.
Yes, please do.
Great, thanks, Eleanor and Paul. I saw we had a hand up, but I think it's gone down now. Alastair.
Oh, I seized the moment, and there's a little lull there, so I thought I'd jump in just before we get to the end. It's not a question, but just to say to colleagues a couple of things. One is that we are wanting to regather, collate resources around trauma-informed practice in schools. It's a never-ending wheel that we keep turning in terms of trying to gather and regather and share and disseminate. But so we want to pull things together, because some things are specific to Tower Hamlets, so there's always good to have local resources as well as a kind of range of national organizations and people that you can draw on. So please do, I'm going to just say to Jennifer, if you've got links, ideas, resources that you know of that you want to share, if you could email them to Jennifer Coyle, because I think you should all have her email if you're here. So if you could do that. And then just secondly, to say that we're proposing to have a termly schools trauma-informed practice session. So this has been a great opportunity to pull people together, but we think we've been the greatest resource we have is ourselves and you all who are doing this work. So we want to have an opportunity to share practice and resources and networks. So there'll be a termly schools trauma-informed practice session. So we haven't got a date, but they'll be for obviously spring and summer, and we'll hopefully keep that as a rolling program that schools also can shape in terms of what works for them, with a little bit of kind of input and support from some of us multi-agency colleagues as well. So there'll be more information for follow-up. This isn't an end or a one-off.
That's great. Thanks, Alastair. And I've just popped my email in the chat if anyone wants to contact me. Charlotte.
Thanks. Yeah, that it's been really fantastic to hear the range of things that are going on. And Alastair said some of what I was going to say about the schools trauma-informed practice group. And I think we had been meeting on a Tuesday, sort of 4 till 5, once a term. So I think yes, I don't know the best. Perhaps the best way of us contacting you is to put that in via the head teacher bulletin, so that it goes to all schools leads. And I think that just sort of reflecting back, one of the points that I think has come through all of the presentations really is that leadership is absolutely key, and that whole school approach is the only way to do it. And Bernie's presentation about how George Green's gone about it is really inspiring, because it's everybody. Everyone has to sign up for it. Everyone has to kind of get through their questions and anxiety and fear about, what do I do when I've got one child swearing in front of everybody else, or how does this work in practice? And the same with Eleanor's talk about sort of techniques in a way, or ways of approaching it in schools, and kind of refining it to small steps. So I think it's really useful to think about all of those things. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Charlotte, and I agree. So I've just seen we're at time. So if we don't have any more questions, we might wrap it up here.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much to all of the presenters and for Jen and Alastair and Charlotte for organizing. It's been really, personally, really interesting for me, being very removed from the education world. And also great to tie in the different aspects of trauma informed, because we often are speaking about the responding to, or so it's great to focus on prevention as well. I posted the evaluation form in the chat. I'll just post it again in case you missed it. So please do share your feedback or ideas for future sessions. It's great to hear that there will be education focused ones termly. That's really wonderful to see. But if you want to connect with the broader world of Tower Hamlets, which I do encourage, you're very welcome here. And yeah, thank you all for your time and for our presenters, and I wish you a great rest of your day.